Hello, I'm recording, I believe, right now. It's my pleasure to give a talk to the Northern California botanists. And the title of my talk is Monitoring Butterfly Populations in the Sierra-Cascade Foothills as part of a global conservation initiative. I'm Don Miller, Department of Biological Sciences at Chico State, and I'll be talking about ongoing efforts to survey and monitor butterfly populations useful as bioindicators of environmental quality in the Sierra-Cascade Foothills. And the photo here is an eager butterfly counter back in 2018, Lisa Sorensen with a willing participant, a morning clerk butterfly resting on her shoulder, ready to get started for the day. So I'll say a few words about these efforts in particular and how they fit into a larger context of understanding patterns in biological diversity and long-term trends, and including declines in butterfly populations, reflecting overall declines in biological diversity. In a recent issue of The New Yorker, the writer Elizabeth Colbert, in her article, Bugs in the System, wrote as a preface, "Insects are the largest class of animals on the planet. What will their decline mean for the rest of us?" In the Proceedings of National Academy of the Sciences earlier this year, a special feature was published focusing on insect decline in the Anthropocene, death by 1,000 cuts. And in this issue, here's a photo of an iconic butterfly, the regal fritillary, Spiraea idalia, which is a pollinator native to the tallgrass prairie of the Midwest that once was. And almost all of this habitat is gone. It's been converted largely to corn and soybeans, which are largely used as animal feed for animal agriculture. A bit more about this special feature in Proceedings of National Academy of the Sciences. It includes review articles by such people as Peter Raven, Matt Forrester, David Wagner, May Berenbaum, and many other authorities. And the phrase death by 1,000 cuts seems apt. Rather than finding a single cause for the decline of insects in general and butterflies in particular, there's a whole series of factors which include, but are not limited to, habitat loss, intensive agriculture, the rampant use of insecticides, in particular neonicotinoids, and introduced species, and underlying all of this, disruptive climate change. A little bit about my previous work. I've been studying watching butterflies since I was in kindergarten in 1966. And much more recently, I've studied them more formally as biological indicators of environmental quality in tropical rainforest in Papua New Guinea, going back about 10 years. I've also given presentations or held workshops at the Chico State Friends of the Chico State Herbarium. I've given presentations at Lepidoptera Society meetings, and I participated or led annual 4th of July butterfly counts going back 30 years in Kentucky, Arizona, and California. I've launched, if you will, an annual regional butterfly count, and this is sponsored by the North American Butterfly Association. I'll just call it NABA. And this has been based at Chico State's Big Chico Creek Ecological Reserve, or BCCER, as well as the Butte Creek Ecological Preserve. And NABA, the governing body, has archived large masses of data collected by us here and across the continent, going back 45 years. In March of 2021, a paper was published in Science, which actually incorporated our efforts and much, much more data as part of a larger study documenting butterfly population trends across Western North America. So I'll say a few more words about that after I give some details about our counts here in Chico. One concept I think is worth discussing is that of the ecotype. And an ecotype is thought to be a genetically distinct entity that's associated with a particular host plant or a particular habitat. And this is happening in the Anthropocene, which is an epoch defined by the indelible stamp of humanity on the face of planet Earth. Now, humans have a habit of moving things around deliberately or accidentally, including host plants, which have been brought to California and are thought to have promoted the origin of ecotypes of certain California butterflies. And I have a couple of examples here, including Poanis mulane, which is a strong possibility, and Papilio zelicaon, which is a confirmed case of ecotypes in California. So what I'll do is walk through a series of species here, use them as examples to explore some of these ideas. And I'll try to do this systematically by finding representatives from various families. I'll start with the skipper family, the Hesperiidae, and a species we've looked at carefully across the years is the umber skipper or Poanis mulane. And we understand that in California, the original populations are fairly reclusive and may be found in canyons. And their larvae use native grasses as host plants. But more recently, with the introduction of many species of grasses, including Cynodon dactylon, the Bermuda grass, in the Bay Area and elsewhere, new ecotype may be forming, which is using this Bermuda grass. So here's an adult on the right of the skipper butterfly. And in this panel on the lower left, this graph shows our counts between 2008 and 2021. So I'll say a few words about how the counts are conducted. These butterfly counts are modeled loosely after the Audubon Society Christmas bird counts, which go back 120 years. And the idea is to find participants from the public who go out and survey along carefully marked transects all of the butterflies they see, all of the species and all of the individuals on a given day within a count circle. So the butterfly count and the bird count have that in common. And this graph shows the number of Poanis mulane skippers observed between 2008 and 2021. And you can see it bounces around a fair bit, between 0 and then 6 animals over the whole day. For most of these counts across the years, we've averaged 15 to 20 party hours of effort. So that's a way to measure how hard we're trying. We usually take most of the day in doing these observations. So that way things are comparable across the years as much as possible, and our data are credible. Here's another species that's confirmed to be an ecotype, and this is the Antiswallowtill or Papilio zelicaon. And this is in the swallowtail family, the Papilionidae. We understand historically, these butterflies use lematium and other members of the carrot family that occurred naturally. And they were limited to a single brood, as is the case today in the Big Chico Creek Ecological Reserve. However, in the Bay Area and along the coast, Papilio zelicaon has adopted the introduced fennel plant, Feniculum vulgare, and now it's multiple brooded in these areas. And so it actually seems to be benefiting from the introduction of this exotic host plant. Now, to find these butterflies on our butterfly counts, we do best when we climb to hilltops, and we could take advantage of the tendency of males and sometimes females to come to these hilltops seeking mates. And on the lower left, you can see our observations, and they vary again between 0 and up to as many as 13. This species, the pipevine swallowtail, Batis philenor, is surely the most abundant species in our counts, and we often get numbers of butterflies into the hundreds. A little bit more about this subspecies, Batis philenor hirsuta. It's limited largely to California, and it specializes on California pipevine, Aristolochia californica. Whereas the nominate subspecies, Batis philenor ranges across North America and down into Latin America and uses other pipevines as host plants. So this is a very distinctive one. We understand the host plant contains the compound aristolochic acid, which confers protection to the butterflies because they eat this plant. And you can see the scale here in our observations ranges all the way up past 250 butterflies on a single count day. So they're often the most abundant, and they're about the only species in which we regularly observe caterpillars or larvae, which are also valid as count items for NABA, the North American Butterfly Association. Here's an adult visiting Tritolea laxa. Another swallowtail we see regularly is the Western tiger swallowtail, or Papilio rutilis. And this is interesting in that it seems to be doing well in urban environments. So it seems also to have benefited from the introduction of certain plants, host plants, ash trees in the genus Fraxinus, and sycamores, platanus. And so it uses these exotic host plants to its benefit. And these butterflies are actually quite common in the city, in Chico at least. So on the left is a male puddling in a patch of mud, which is what these butterflies often do. On the right is a larva that's extending a defensive organ called an osmeterium. And if the larva is bothered or disturbed by a bird or other potential predator, it extends this and it releases organic volatiles. For example, butyric acid is one of these compounds. And these are our observations over the years, ranging between just a few and up to 37. They seem to be doing pretty well on these counts. Here's a case of a butterfly that isn't doing so well. And this is in the family Lysenidae, or the gossamer winged butterflies. This is the tailed copper, Lysena erota. And it's a good example, I think, of a case where the host plant seems to be perfectly common, but the butterfly currently hasn't been seen in the last 5 years, as you can see in this graph. We don't know why it seems to have disappeared, but it illustrates the point that the presence of the host plant is necessary, but not sufficient to support these butterflies. And we don't know the reasons why they seem to have disappeared, but we haven't seen them in 5 years, and we hope they're not gone from the reserve. I have a couple of hairstreaks I'd like to talk about. The first being the California hairstreak, Sotarium californica, which in general across the Pacific coast is thought to be declining, but we seem to have robust populations at the Big Chico Creek Ecological Reserve. And you can see our numbers range up above 85 on some years. As pollinators, these butterflies frequently visit the coffeeberry, Frangula californica, which is a very good place to find them on our count day, which tends to be the first Friday or Thursday in June. Now, another California hairstreak, and this one I'm particularly excited about, is the Sylvan hairstreak, Sotarium Sylvenus. And this is thought to have declined even more and disappeared from many of its former haunts but we seem to have robust populations at BCCER. And in fact, for a number of years, we've recorded the highest numbers of the species, more than any other count, across North America. And I might point out that there were over 400 of these counts. So I'm very pleased to say, at least currently, the hairstreak seems to be doing quite well. So it and the California hairstreak frequent the canyon bottom along Big Chico Creek, and they visit avidly the Indian hemp, Epocinum cannabinum here, or dogbane. It's an excellent place to find them. Another species we pay attention to is Watervales blue, plapias, Icarioides. Here's a species that seems to do well in the wake of fire. Now, one of its host plants is Lupinus albifrons, which flourishes a couple of years, a year or two following fire. And the management of the BCCER make a point of using controlled fire to manage the property. And this seems to benefit these butterflies. There's another species of interest is in the family Nymphalidae, or brush-footed butterflies, the variable checkerspot, Euphydrius chalcedona. And this is thought to be protected thanks to the sequestration of iridoid glycosides, which are obtained from the larval host plant, in this case, Mimulus aurantiacus. And here's an adult perched on flowers of the host plant. Now, we don't have such great news for this species. We have had good numbers in the past, but recently the numbers seem to be down. There may be a long-term decline in this species. And this is the last species I'll focus on, the monarch butterfly, the well-known iconic butterfly of North America, Danaus plexippus. Here it is visiting Euryalps in Monterey, California, where historically it has overwintered. Our numbers have never been high, but lately we haven't seen any monarchs in the last couple of years. I need to mention, as many of you probably know, that there's a lot of concern about the long-term well-being of Western North American populations of monarchs. One excellent place to count them is along the coast between November and February, where they overwinter and gather on oaks or eucalyptus trees. And it makes for much easier estimates of their total populations. But their numbers have drastically declined in recent years by over 99%. And where there used to be hundreds of thousands or millions of them congregating, there may only be a few thousand. And so unfortunately, in the last couple of years, we haven't seen any of the monarch. So now I want to say a few words about larger trends and how our work fits into this context of general decline of insects and butterflies in particular. And this article came out in March of this year, 2021, put together by a number of authorities, including Art Shapiro and his former student, Matt Forrester, Jeffrey Glassberg, Chris Nice. And the point is that it's been suspected that climate change in particular is correlated with the decline of a lot of our wildlife, including the butterflies. So the warming and drying landscapes of the American West are the place where these declines are occurring. And the upshot is there has been a 1.6% annual reduction in the number of individual butterflies going back 40 years. This map shows some of the NABA annual butterfly count locations. And the red dot indicates that it's a location with at least 10 years of data, including ours. And I think this is ours at the Big Chico Creek Ecological Reserve here in Northern California. So I'm pleased to see that this work is paying off as part of a much larger, more extended effort to monitor butterfly populations in North America. Here's a bit more from the same article. Our spot here, Big Chico Creek Ecological Reserve, is highlighted, and I'll just scroll across to point out that the change, okay, which as defined in the caption is the exponentiated rate coefficient, okay, is given here as 1.006. Now that's not bad news. That's suggesting that overall the populations of butterflies in our count, okay, are holding relatively steady. So numbers at 1.000 are steady. If they're less than 1, they're declining. If they're more than 1, they're increasing. So that seems to be fair news, or at least promising news overall for our locality. This panel, also from the same paper, gives details of 4 species and the numbers, and you can see how they bounce, revealed by the NABA butterfly count, and in the case of Sotarium californica here, that's the first panel here. You see how they go back to before 1980, and they bounce around a good deal. The second panel, the blue dots, these are Art Shapiro's personal counts, and he's personally carried out 35, 40, 45 years of intensive butterfly monitoring. And on the right, the third panel is a newer database, and this is the iNaturalist database, which brings citizen scientists right into this mix as well. So we have 3 sources of data in this paper. We've got the North American Butterfly Association counts, we have Art Shapiro's personal counts, and we have the iNaturalist counts. And the data are obviously noisy, but overall, again, for a number of species, for most of these species, they're showing a general decline. In this panel, also from the article, it's suggested that differential seasonal warming is associated with changes in butterfly density. So in particular, the authors identify an increase in autumnal warming during the fall months that seems to be disrupting the developmental schedules of many butterflies. And this could be a factor behind their general decline. So this, of course, is tied to climate change. I would just finish here by saying we have hopeful signs that butterfly populations are at least hanging on reasonably well. Some species more than others. We do have unfortunate news for some of the species, including the iconic monarch butterfly. There's a great deal of good work that can be done, but I think slowing down and arresting climate change, if at all possible, is going to be foremost among the things that can be done to help us preserve our biodiversity in perpetuity. Thanks for your attention. I want to acknowledge support from my College of Natural Sciences at Chico State and the Center for Water and the Environment, as well as the Big Chico Creek Ecological Reserve, and of course the staff, including Eli Goodsell, Paul Maslin, John All, Sterling Mattoon, Don Hankins, Jeff Mott, and many, many counters over the years. And this is a photo of my daughters back in 2008. They gave me inspiration to do my best to help preserve our biodiversity. I'll just point out that our next count will be Friday, June, I can't see that date, I'm sorry, June the 5th or June the 3rd for 2022, and you can contact the BCCER staff if you're interested in helping with the count. I'll also take the opportunity to announce that the 8th International Plant Golf Symposium has been postponed until July 2023 because of COVID complications. So thanks again for your attention and take care.